Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 7 o'clock, despite the fact that that clock is not working, and the one next door is not working. I'm assured it is 7 o'clock, so let's make a start. Can I welcome you all to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee? And before we do anything else, I must read out the security arrangements. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. And that takes us on to item 1, the appointment of substitutes. Margaret?
There are no substitutes, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest from any member? There are none. Item 3, public participation. Margaret?
No public participation, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July. If we can go through those page by page, please, and I'll sign them as a correct record, if they are a correct record. Page 1, 2, and 3. There being no comments or objections, I'll sign those as a correct record then. And that takes us on to item 5, external audit progress 2020-21 and 21-22. Mr. Baldwin's going to present this, and I'll ask him to do that now, and then members will have questions and comments afterwards, I'm quite sure. Mr. Baldwin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is an update on the progress for the audit of both 2021 and 21-22 annual accounts. You'll recall from previous meetings this has been somewhat of a saga. So just as a brief reminder, we produced the draft accounts for the year 2021 in line with the deadline of 31st of May 21. The deadline that then followed that was to publish the audited accounts by the 30th of September. But by that date, the external auditors hadn't yet started the work. They did finally begin work in November, and over a 4-week period covered quite a lot of ground using teleconferencing, so doing it remotely as we'd done during the pandemic, which has proved to be quite successful. But unfortunately, the shortage of resource for them meant they couldn't then recommence and finish the work until August just passed, August 22. And of course, in that time, several members of the audit team had left and new people had been recruited. So some of that continuity in the work was lost, which meant that we were at times covering ground that we'd already explained to people. I think what's significant and certainly worthy of note is that the degree of scrutiny that the auditors are exercising now has increased significantly compared to previous years. To put that into context, our accounts are 100 pages long, and each of those pages contains a lot of detail in terms of facts and figures. For the first time, they are literally checking every number within those 100 pages. There's probably an argument to say that's a positive, that they are applying that level of detail, but that's part of the reason why the work is taking them so much longer. And when we come on to the fee note at the end, it's also contributing, as a result of the extra work they've incurred, the fee increases that they're then requesting. One of the outcomes of this greater scrutiny is that we now have a number of proposed amendments to the draft accounts that we issued. I've always prided myself on, in previous years, that we've had no adjustments to our accounts. At the current count, we now have 18. And those broadly, and we'll cover these at the next meeting, but they broadly fall down into 2 or 3 categories. There are some minor details that we've overlooked updating from last year, perhaps a comment left in that shouldn't be there, and they've picked those up. Probably more significant is that things that we'd assumed in our approach that they were happy with, they're now saying that they're not. And when we've asked why, they said, well, this is the first time that we've actually looked at it in any detail. We've always assumed that it was okay before. They're now disagreeing with us. So there's an element of a catch-up exercise that then will hopefully not be repeated in future years. I'm hoping that we will have a final set of audited accounts for the next meeting in December, which will include their report, and they will attend the meeting as well. I can't guarantee that, and the saga of the last few months leads me to just be wary in terms of guaranteeing anything. But the position we're at, I'm reasonably comfortable that we will have them for that next meeting. In terms of 21-22, we should have issued a draft set of accounts by the end of May, but weren't able to do so because 2021 hadn't been audited. And without that being audited, we don't have a set of balances to start the 21-22 accounts. And we also hadn't received the property valuations from external valuers, Bruton Knowles. We now have had the property valuations, albeit only a few weeks ago, although they've been promised for mid-May. And once we've agreed the opening position with EY, then we'll be able to produce those 21-22 accounts. And to put that into context, there's probably a couple of weeks work for us there once we've got those agreements in place. However, I haven't yet had any communication from Ernst Young in terms of when they'll be able to start the audit of 21-22. I'm hoping to get that in the next few weeks. The last conversation I had with them on it was that they hope to do so before Christmas, but that's yet to be confirmed. That means that depending on how long that one takes, and typically we're talking about a few months, we're unlikely to have finished the 21-22 audit before this current year 22-23 finishes, and we'll then be producing another set of accounts. The obvious implications for our finance team is that, me included, we're working across 4 years now. We're trying to close out the audit for 21-22, prepare the accounts for 21-22, monitor the current goings on in 22-23, and in the next couple of weeks we're going to start thinking about budgeting for 23-24. So some mental gymnastics going on, which is fine. There's nothing in that we can't handle. It just gets a bit wearing and at times a bit confusing, because if you're not careful, you find yourself using figures in the wrong year to the one that you should be looking at. In terms of the audit fees in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9, the fee for 19-20 has now been fully paid and settled. The original fee set by the PSAA, who make the appointments, was 39,000. Following completion of the audit, EY requested an additional fee of another 50,000 on top of the 39. Following a review by the PSAA, they've agreed an additional 21,000, making a total of 61. And of that 21,000, they've ruled that 9,000 of it is considered to be of a recurring nature and should be applied to future fees. And there is now an error in the report, I'm afraid. So the 9,000 is in addition to the 39,000, which was the original fee, which will be a new total of 48,000. The report actually says 45, so my apologies for that. But they've also noted that their review is ongoing and that further elements may be classed as recurring, which would prompt further increases. I think it's worth noting that EY wanted another 50,000 and we're only had the extra 21 agreed. Given that the degree of extra work they're carrying out at the moment, the subject of fee additions is going to be an ongoing conversation, I think. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. There are just two general points I would make and then throw it open to the members of the committee. The first question is, the situation we're in is quite unprecedented. And I hasten to add, if the press are listening, absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with the offices of the City Council, totally beyond our control. So how is these extraneous factors affecting the work of the City Council? And the second question is, and this may be for Ernst & Young rather than yourself, which is paragraph 3.4, where, and you've highlighted it, the degree of scrutiny exercised by the auditors has increased significantly. That, as you say, may well be a good thing, opening us up to closer scrutiny, or is it the case that they are creating more work for themselves to demand a higher fee? So those two questions to start with.
Thank you. In terms of the impact on the council's finance team, we're fortunate in having an experienced team, so I'm pleased to report that nothing is getting missed, or no other deadlines are being missed. Having said that, it is, I mentioned the 4-year situation, and I think the team are finding it a little bit wearing, but that's not something we can do anything about, so we will continue to press on. In terms of your second point, I don't think I can comment on that, but I suggest you note it in the minutes, and when hopefully EY are here in December, they can comment. I will forward them a copy of the minutes in the meantime.
Yes, thank you. If you perhaps could highlight that minutes to them and remind them or warn them that there will be a question to that effect at the December meeting when we're expecting them to be present. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking about this 3.4, the extra scrutiny. Is there any sort of set guidelines for this? I mean, I work for a UCAS laboratory. It is set down in international and agreed law with all the other laboratories that it's one every other year. We get a 3-year rotation where we get a reassessment, and everything you offer as a UCAS test is reassessed, and then surveillance, which is a partial assessment for the other 2 years. Is there any form of guidance? Why have, if they've gone for extra scrutiny and they're saying this is the new way they're working, is that agreed in any way with anyone, or that this has happened?
Mr. Baldwin, good question.
Thank you. I think if they were here, they would say that they're not adopting any different approach than they've done before. It's just that they're doing more detail. The question as to why they're doing the more detail, I think if you've followed the press over the last couple of years, you'll have seen that the audit firms have taken a fair amount of criticism for failings in audits in both the public and private sector. So there have often been cases of companies and public sector organisations that have come into financial difficulty, and that's then cast an eye towards the previous audit, which hadn't raised any concerns. So I think that's part of the reason why they're going into more detail. But again, I think it's a question worth asking them when they're here.
And another part, thank you, Chair, is if it's the EY team that's changing, why are we being charged an additional fee to accommodate their not being able to complete their audit within their original timescales?
Again, I think if they were here, they would say that we're not bearing the cost of the change in the people. We're just paying for the work that's been done. I guess if we were splitting hairs, you could say, well, it would be done quicker and more efficiently if you'd got the same team in place. But that's and it is inevitable that, particularly in a profession where the staff tend to be quite young, that they do move on quite quickly. I think that it's just unfortunate we've had this long delay of 8-10 months between the two periods of work.
Are they an appointed auditor? Are we obliged to continue to use them?
So the appointment was made by the PSAA, the Public Sector Audit Appointments Body, and that was for a period of, I think, 5 years, and we're part way through that 5-year period. We don't have to opt into what the PSAA offer. We could, we have the opportunity to say we'll do it independently ourselves, but that then involves a considerable amount of work for us all in terms of inviting tenders, interviewing, and so on and so on. And you would hope that the PSAA have got the measure of the fees that are then being charged across the country, and will therefore negotiate something for us that's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. I'm sure Councillor Lawrence will be able to press these points at the December meeting, should Ernst & Young attend, as we are expecting and hoping. Do members of the committee have any other questions or comments or points to make? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, at the moment, we're 2 years behind on our audited accounts, and it's, I'd say, 100% certain that come next May, next year will be in arrears as well. What are the implications for the council, both financial, in terms of things like credit ratings, and the legal situation of us not being getting our accounts in on time?
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin.
Through you, Chair. A good question. If we were a private sector business, the situation would be quite serious. We'd be missing Companies House deadlines. It would affect our credit rating, the potential to borrow, and so on. In the public sector, the situation is quite different. There are no penalties for failing to file, complete your audited accounts. In terms of borrowing, we borrow through the Public Works Loan Board that don't refer to a council's accounts. It's simply a case of making the request. And in terms of credit ratings do include looking at sets of accounts, but they're also based on a broader set of measures, including county court judgments, the dates on which payments are made against due dates, and so on and so on. So there are no concerns there, fortunately.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? In that case, could I please put the recommendation to the committee that the Audit and Governance Committee notes the external auditor's progress with the audits for 2020-21 and 21-22. Is that agreed? Could we just show of hands, just make it? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that takes us on to item 6, the Internal Audit Progress Report 2022-23, and Mr. Bromwich is going to introduce this report. Mr. Bromwich.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, before us tonight is the familiar report that most members will see and understand. It is our progress report. It's written as at the end of July, and it does really inform members as to the continuing process and progress for the 22-23 plan. And as part of that reporting, it brings to your attention any potential risks or exceptions worth noting. So as far as the 22-23 reviews are concerned, two reviews have been finalised and are reported in full in the report this evening, Appendix 3, page 11. And 2 reviews are essentially awaiting sign-off, so it's showing that progression of the 22-23 plan. The additional piece of work that was requested by the Chair and the committee in regards to grants is also included in the report, and so that both is included both as a formal report itself, but also in the main body of the report in summary form. So as far as the grants are concerned, the grants that have been tested, have all followed due process through their application procedure. Those awarded a grant have provided end of project reports where appropriate, and organisations who have not provided an end of project report are in fact proactively chased. We know that that is the case, we know that that happens, but in this particular instance, when the report was written, there were none actually outstanding at that particular point in time. So the return deadline for those end of project reports had not been exceeded. So as far as the actual projects are concerned, there is a clear process, there is due diligence being applied through the application process, and also the end of year project reports are identifying any essentially any variation in the delivery of that project and how the grant money has been used, and that's being administered by the grants team. So there is a very sound, and hopefully I can provide you with assurance this evening that particular process within the community grants is sound. Finalised reports will be brought before committee as and when they are cleared. There's no high priority recommendations being reported this evening for those reports that have been finalised. So again, that is quite pleasing. So there isn't the identification of any potential risks being identified, and all of the reports that we report on and we bring before members are subject to follow up in due course. In regards to NFI, National Fraud Initiative, that continues. The next major data upload is planned for October and November this year. We, as internal audit, are playing an advisory coordinating role in regards to both Worcester as well as our other partners in regards to that. There will be a further upload during December, January for single person discount and the electoral roll as well, but that's that will be reported as part of the December committee. As far as the follow-ups are concerned, those are reported in Appendix 4 of your agenda tonight on page 25. All of the car parking recommendations have been implemented, and the recommendations for the benefits review that was undertaken are either implemented or partially implemented. In regards to the car parking, there are a couple of entries there which, if you're looking at it in with colour, they should be showing as red, as they were high priority recommendations, but they have been satisfied now. So we are comfortable that they've been addressed. With any follow-ups, we essentially report by exception, and there are no exceptions to be reported this evening in regards to those follow-ups that are before you. So in summary, in regards to the actions taken against the reviews, the direction of travel is positive, and from my perspective, I am comfortable and confident that the actions have actually been taken to address those particular issues, or they're in hand in order to address those issues. Also included in your bundle tonight are appendices 1 and 2, page 7 and 8, and they really provide an overview of progress in regards to the 22-23 plan, and it provides a summary of days against the actual budgeted days that were set out in the draft plan that was brought before committee back in March, I think it was, and the the other appendices show a full oversight of the 22-23 plan and the ongoing progress in regards to the delivery of the current year's plan. So it provides sort of a holistic view of the plan delivery. At that, Chair, I'll pause and invite any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bromwich. Things are looking good and encouraging at the moment, so thank you for that. And as I said before, I think that the format of the final and follow-up reports in the appendices is good. I find them clear and understandable. And perhaps I could just ask the members of the committee, do you also find that the format of those reports clear and understandable? Because I'm conscious that sometimes there's too much jargon, it's too technical, too complicated, and people don't understand it. So there's not much point in having a report that members don't understand. But if you're happy with the format of these reports, but at all times, I would urge you, if you think things can be laid out or formatted in a different way to make it clearer, please let me know, and the officers, I'm sure, will be able to accommodate any changes, because it is important that the agendas and the reports are clear. So thank you for that, Mr. Bromwich, but the members seem happy with the format. So over to the committee for any questions or comments thereon. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the community grant monitoring, I was very reassured about that there's a very solid process and it's being followed, and we can be very confident that things are being done properly and that it is being done in an appropriate way. Perhaps we could next look at the member grants that have been available to individual members over the last 2 years. I know it's a small amount of money each year, £2,000 to help on local projects to alleviate COVID issues. Perhaps we could have a sweep up at the end of that process just to satisfy ourselves that the money has been properly used.
Mr. Bromwich.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, by all means, we can include that in a future plan, and we'll be more than happy to report back and provide any assurance that you're looking for, or not, as the case may be, in order to show transparency in regards to those grants that are given by members. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bromwich. Obviously, Councillor Barnes is making a good point. Whether the money is large or small, it all needs to be accounted for and properly audited. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Petrosky.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad that Councillor Barnes mentioned the relatively small amount of money allocated to members. It made me think about the criteria for the distribution of grants. So is this something that the audit includes, is it included in the process? So setting out criteria both for the community grants and also for giving out the personal members grants.
Okay, Mr. Bromwich.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Yes, in order to undertake a review, we would set a scoping, which would include the terms and conditions that are applied to any grants, and then we would review based on those agreed parameters to see if the grant was within what was originally agreed as part of those terms and conditions. So yes, the scoping of any review is critical, and we would be looking at what has been provided as the criteria in which the grant has been requested and whether that has been satisfied. Thank you, Chair.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Petrosky? Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? That being the case, I move the recommendation that the committee notes the report. Is that agreed with a show of hands, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 7, any other business. I haven't been notified of any, but is there any urgent business? No, in which case I thank you for your attendance and close the meeting. Thank you very much.